So question.
Great. So that's
We're expanding. We're gonna have 27 kids in the student council next year.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But the key thing is that they got to, that we're gonna really involve those. They're gonna meet every day during the first 40 minutes of the school day during teacher advisory. So, but they're gonna plan a bunch of different activities and everything. And
Awesome.
I mean, everything. Yeah. I mean, everything from voice and school policy to, of course, the dances, which but the field trips, and then also checking up on the other advisors, making sure you didn't complete your survey. Is not that way. But they're just a very energetic group and everything. So.
Good. I was on the student council in law school.
Oh, cool.
Interesting experience.
Yeah.
They wanted to do. I spent so much time trying to get a divestiture resolution.
Oh wow. Okay.
Personally, I'm not in favor of. I'm like, I know the headline would be great,
Right.
but what about actual reductions in energy use and conservation at the school?
Yeah.
And they were like, no, waste of time. I was like, okay, well, I think we should do that first, but
We want the virtue signaling. Give us the virtue.
yeah, I can't remember if they got it. Probably eventually they did.
Yes,
How are you?
I'm good. I don't have a conflict now. I know.
I honestly didn't we go through the dates and like.
Yeah, and I was conflicted out for a couple
I know
months,
you
and then
were
I
for-
realized that actually,
Oh,
like, holidays were when.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, it's just, yeah.
I thought that it was more than as many and then it was less.
I thought it was fewer as well, but it was not.
I'm glad you're here tonight. And I hope you can come next month because I got a Dominion.
Oh.
Pretty excited.
See ya.
That door was open.
The one that Neil gave me. Eight. So I think he's charged. Let me check his title.
Can speak to the issues.
Yeah. Googling someone, finding out there's a famous person.
Scroll,
Like,
scroll down, scroll
And I was first dating my husband, Ryan Whitney. There's a Canadian hockey player, that name.
Oh,
I'm like, I can't find any dirt on this.
Oh, that's fantastic.
General manager, new business and customer solutions.
Good, how you doing?
Good.
Virtual power plant.
Yeah.
So we'll start talking about that today and then come join us in July. Rich, I think we had some folks already on the docket for July.
Presenters.
Yeah. Maybe me too.
So Jason Papacosma, I reached out to him to talk about the possibility, but Jen Fioretti had noted that I think we'd be available to present, she'd be available to present on the corporate climate leaders.
Okay.
That initiative in
Okay.
July. So at a minimum that, but for Jason, I think it's to be determined.
Okay. Sounds like we wouldn't have to bump anyone necessarily.
Right. So you have, Madam Chair, I think you have a quorum.
Fantastic. Way to go, Claire. All right, let's call the meeting to order. First order of business is to approve the agenda, the May meeting summary. Apologies for the agenda. I believe Julie sent the May meeting summary around already. So any discussion on that? Not, I'd entertain a motion to approve both without objection. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, those are approved. Any public comment?
Let's see,
Let's see any guests.
Yeah, don't see any guests.
Okay.
Jamie and Greg are in the meeting remotely and,
Okay, well, we'll move right along. Quick update on C2E2's last meeting. We had a number of presentations from county staff, including on the solid waste plan from Doug Credemeyer and Adam Rydell. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yep.
Jenna Peabody presented on air, and Jen gave an update on CPO work plan. And we had more discussion on our changing SPRC checklist and approved a letter to the county board on the master transportation plan. Any other C2E2 members want to provide any color or detail to that? I will add that at the next C2E2 meeting, which is, I guess, a little more than a week away, I'll be giving an update on the virtual power plant discussion that we're going to start talking about today. I'm hoping to have at least a conversation to chat with Nate Frost about Dominion's perspective. And I'm going to be talking to Jim Purical of Advanced Energy Economy next week, who were instrumental in getting that legislation passed. So I'll sort of some of my initial thoughts this week at this meeting, and then feel free to tune in to the C2E2 presentation. I think that'll hopefully go well. Use cheering squad. So let's see. I think that's it for C2E2.
Yeah, maybe Doug, do you have something to add to that?
Go ahead.
I just want to give a plug for Jenna. One of the things we talked about relevant to this energy committee is the importance of kind of actions of citizens. And so the accelerate, what Jenna's been doing for the public outreach and the accelerate report that came out, I think is really good and worth noting, and particularly relevant to this community, and it's available now online. She also mentioned the AIR newsletter, now 7,000 subscribers, which is decent.
That's great. Yeah.
So, that's all I want to talk about.
Yeah, that report, I think, really exemplifies what a public-facing document should look like. It's very visually attractive and yet data-rich. So good call out. Anything else, Doug? Were you going to ask something?
I mean, I asked Jenna after the meeting how many people got that accelerated report, and the number was 16. So that was
In terms of how many people it gets sent out to, or
yeah, or how many people had
Downloaded it.
looked at it, downloaded. I'm not exactly.
Maybe we
sure.
could ask for an update on, because she has all the Google Analytics probably for
Oh,
downloads
yeah.
and stuff, and maybe we just ask for it at the next C2E2 meeting, like
Yeah.
what kind of promotion is being done and what's the latest stats.
It's a great report and lots of colors and, very visually nice. And I'm sure she put a lot of time into it and very well done, but
means
You know,
people got to read it.
it's into the void then, unfortunately.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Excellent. Well, our speaker today is Tanner Prime. I don't see Kathy.
Well, unfortunately, Kathy had a last minute
That's all right.
mistake, so she couldn't be here.
So Tanner's going to take us through some discussions about Arlington Public Schools. I'm sure Kip will have some things to add. I think last year we mostly talked about curriculum and a little bit about the solar facilities, but I'm looking forward to hearing an update on both. And without further ado, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of made a little presentation here. I'm excited to share. We're going to touch on some general energy stuff, some transportation, definitely solar, because that's something big. First, I want to apologize. It's been a minute since I've been in the meetings. I was at PEPCA annual meetings last month, and the month previous was spring break. So, I had to enjoy that. But I hope to keep coming back to these meetings. I hope these conversations keep going. But let's get started. So energy and sustainability kind of at APS. If you didn't already know, my name's Tanner Prime, and I serve as the energy manager, and I also do the stormwater program for them. A little plug here that we'll talk about later. I'm also a staff liaison to the Superintendent's Advisory Committee on Sustainability. Contact information there. And then I like this picture. This is some of the F&O crew. That was this time about last year, the last day of school. We all thought we'd wear Hawaiian shirts.
I thought you were going to say spring break.
That was school's out for the summer. White hair was in last year. I'm growing a couple right now though, so maybe I'll get there. So real quick, the agenda, I kind of broke it up 3 parts. We're going to talk about where we are now, where we're going. So the where we are now, we're going to build environment, transportation. I'm going to touch on waste a little bit. And then the big kind of highlight I think APS does amazing at is the Sustainability Liaison Program and the Environmental Literacy Plan. The where we're going, we're going to talk about the strategic plan that came out and that we're trying to follow, and then the 2025 capital improvement plan that just went through. And then we'll take some time for questions. And I put inspirations because every time I come here, I learn something new. Actually, every time I hang out with Rich Dooley, I learn something new. So excited to talk about that and answer any other thoughts you had. So looking at the built environment, you see fiscal year 2007 up there. I put that up there because that's our baseline year in the strategic plan. And then everything else energy-wise we're going to talk about is fiscal year 2024 because we're still in 2025, so I didn't quite have all that data cleaned up. Big things I want to point out is look from 2007 to 2024, we were about 4.1 million gross square feet, and now we're at 5.1 million gross square feet. So we went up about 25% in that time frame. Other statistics you might want to know about APS, over 27,000 students, 5,000 employees. We have 38 school buildings. Up there's 3 office buildings. We actually just vacated one last week, so now we're down to 2, just SciFax and the Trade Center where I work. Arlington Outdoor Laboratory, that's not technically land we own, but we pay the utilities on it, so I include that in our carbon footprint. Planetarium, once again, is a building on the Washington Liberty site. We pay the utilities, so I include that. We have 7 joint use facilities. That's Hoffman Boston, Drew, Jefferson, Gunston, Columbia Pike Library, Westover Library. Those facilities that are kind of Park County, community stuff, but we still pay the bills on it. So that's included in our carbon footprint. And then we got a little bit of Dominion pole lights there. So the bottom graph, I like to highlight because I think this shows progress. So back in 2007, we were sitting at about 33,000 metric tons of carbon emissions. Now in fiscal year 2024, we were just about 21,000 metric tons. And so, you got to give credit to the grid. Shout out the Virginia Clean Energy Economy Act. I think that's a big push, and I want to keep that as long as we can. But I also think if you look, and we'll see as we look at some schools, we're building our buildings in a better way. We're trying to use better technology. We're trying to be responsible with the way we use our facilities. And I think that also had an impact in dropping metric tons. The graph, did I lose there? Oh no. I'm not sure it is.
While you pause, can I ask a quick question?
Yep, what's up?
So it's great to see absolute emissions go down. You're selling yourself short because the gross square footage has increased. Do you do the metric normalized too?
So I just learned about that GHG, kind of how you do GHG protocol and you would calculate in square foot. So I haven't done that yet. I do mention it in later slides where we talk about that. So that does makes it look even better. Still means we got to push forward with even more.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that is something I do want to consider moving down there.
You're moving a lot more of your cooking to your own buildings, I understand. So that's another, I think, factor to reflect on these long-term I guess. And yeah, because I mean, my understanding is that there's a lot more cooking that has been taking place and will continue because that's a policy decision. But that would, is another factor to make sure it's an apples to apples comparison.
Apples, that's, okay. That's actually a good point. I didn't think about
Well,
bringing
just
that into
because
the
if you're,
mix.
I mean, because again, you're like, and we're even doing this, not only with an enhanced square footage, but also because we've got, 30 kitchens now that are actually operating on site versus the central kitchen that was, I think, off site and trucking.
Then bringing stuff in, that's absolutely, yeah.
Right, so that should be like just reflected in the future.
Absolutely. And we're going through kitchen renovations right now. We'll touch on that with the CIP. And thankfully, with all those renovations, we're going full electric there too. Anyways, last graph I want to touch on right here, the carbon footprint pie graph. I think this is it paints an interesting picture compared to when you look at the county GHG emissions kind of totals. You'll see that our biggest is 63% is electricity from buildings, and then about 25% is natural gas in our buildings. So about 90% of our carbon emissions, talking scope 1, scope 2, come from our buildings. Sorry about this. I don't know why it keeps cutting out on me. The interesting thing is our bus transportation and sorry, Rich, mind, let me back in there. And then white fleet.
There wasn't.
So our buses and then our white fleet is about 10% there. And then I actually just started tracking the electricity from electric vehicles. And that brings up the small 0.3% there. So moving forward, here's kind of site EUI when you look at all our schools. And the purple line going across that right there is our strategic plan goal of 56 kBTU per square foot. So it's a hit or miss. And if you're looking left to right, left is 2019. So that's kind of pre-COVID. And then we have 2023 and 2024 on there. And you can kind of see pre-COVID, we were up high and we dipped down obviously during COVID. And then we started getting back towards our pre-COVID levels, but we haven't hit there just quite yet. Some new schools did come online. But I also think if there was anything good that came out of COVID, maybe it was a hard reset on all our buildings. Also want to call out, I mean, the new buildings we built, the net zero ones, you're looking at Discovery right here, really low, sitting at 20, Alice West Fleet right here. Cardinal, this was when it was just Reed. And then now you can see the new school built. Obviously Langston, the energy manager needs to take a look at that building, figure out what's happening there. So that kind of gives you big picture school-wide. I do create APS, I call them energy report cards. It's kind of rudimentary. It's just a kind of piece of paper that I break them down into elementary, middle, high school, and you can compare, and they have the EUI graph like this. And then you can drill down and look at each school and see past 3 years of electricity, past 3 years of gas, past 3 years of water consumption, carbon emissions, EUI. And that it's a little basic. I see the dashboards. I want the dashboards. Maybe hold me accountable by the end of the year. We'll see. I'm trying to build one myself. It takes a little more effort than I thought it would be. But I really want to get that out there just so we can all explore and really dig in the details. And I want to bring it to the school side of things and let students really dig into the data as well.
Question just about Yorktown, does that include or exclude the aquatic center?
All the high schools include the aquatic center. So yes.
Okay, so.
Yeah. So those all include the aquatic center. Yeah, you can see the high schools there. And then Washington Liberty actually includes I call it the annex building if you want, and the planetarium as well.
Yeah, it's just more of an aquatic center has a really high usage. So it's yet somehow EUI is
that water.
below others. So, okay.
Take a look at all the.
And actually, I just wanted to share too on that point about the data. Like, so like this to put a foreshadow, like the new math curriculum has basically all grades starting with the data units and everything. And this is something like I actually did share Tanner's report cards with my students and everything, and with my math coach at my school. And we got some hooks in there and everything. We could definitely do a whole lot more with it, but I think it's really cool. My kids got into it. They were interested in like looking at this, looking at their school report card and everything. So
I'd like to dig on that too.
So
Some
can I
future
ask,
engineers.
you mentioned holding yourself accountable. Is there anyone at each of these schools that's accountable for their report cards and getting it below a threshold? Or is that part of anyone else's performance plan aside from your own?
I would say that's probably my own right there, but it would be, I do envision that having exciting and having the, because what they can control is operation uses. And that's a tough thing at some of these schools. I think they want to have a low EUI, but if you look at usually a normal building, your HVAC is covering 70% of your energy use, lighting maybe another 15 to 20, and then you can only really affect maybe that 10%. But that would be a good way, and to get people to buy in more and care more. So I definitely would like to build on that.
yeah, well, and we do have the sustainability leads, which we'll get into
Which-
later.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are
And there-
there's pieces of that we can own. And I think that's been more like the gardens and everything, but we're trying to shift it a little bit like more of a
Doing everything, and
Yeah.
you know, and I want each school to do what they're excited about, driven about. And I do agree.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about solar a little bit here. So end of December, we hit our 10th solar school, which I think is pretty impressive. You can see the 10 schools right there, kind of in chronological order, obviously varying sizes. You can see Glebe is not a typo. That is a 1.1 kilowatt array. I think it's 4 panels. But I was going to say, no little act is too little. And so the other thing I was calling out here is you can see that the first 4 schools were APS owned solar arrays. So we bought and we installed those. Since we bought and own the arrays, APS retains the RECs on that. And everybody's familiar with RECs and what that means. Okay. And then the next 6 are solar schools that we did through PPA agreements. Alice West Fleet, well, the bottom 5, APS does not retain the RECs for those solar arrays. So we can't claim that as green power. However, power still goes to our schools first. Fleet's the only school we have a PPA agreement where we get some RECs out of that. And we did actually a swapping. So the PPA provider sold our RECs and then gave us back cheap, Texas size, Texas windmill, Texas solar RECs. So that way we could still claim. The reason why we did that is because we wanted to get that school as a certified. I don't know why I keep dropping. I got bad
What
Wi-Fi.
does it mean to claim those credits?
So to be the owner of the renewable energy facility, you own the renewable energy credits.
So you don't have any regulatory requirements to own or retire recs. It's just sort of, it would be nice, but
It would,
there's no financial benefit or
Sounds like it was a certification.
I would say the benefit is if we own the RECs, I claim that as green power and therefore it doesn't have carbon emissions. So it doesn't increase our carbon emission goals. So for the bottom 5, even though solar power is on our roof and we use that solar energy, I still have to claim that energy as brown power and put that in as our carbon emissions and calculate
In carbon accounting.
in carbon accounting.
In the greenhouse gas inventory and other measures of.
so the county's greenhouse gas inventory, your,
Or my greenhouse gas inventory.
so it's all kind of internal. There's no statewide requirements or
No, not necessarily. The RECs in Virginia, to own Virginia RECs are very expensive. And that's just because of the Virginia Clean Economy Act, which, is good, I would say. But that means, so that's why, how would I say this? The RECs in Virginia are a lot more expensive than just buying solar power from Texas. And that's because of the Virginia Clean Economy Act. On the other hand, because our RECs are so expensive, that means sometimes PPA providers, if they can retain the RECs, will give us a cheap PPA rate. So it's kind of a give and take, but then on my side, my carbon emissions aren't going down. However, we'll talk about this next one here, because I got a slide.
Do you want to try and give me your slide deck, put it on here, and I'll try and do it that way?
There we go. That way we don't get talking here.
old school.
Did that make sense? Sorry if I didn't explain that completely right.
I would just be, I think I understand it, but my question would just be, is there as we're thinking about it, would there be an advantage for those solar panels to come on for APS?
Would there be an advantage for?
Yeah, like if APS owned all of them, would that make much of a difference one way or the other with emissions? I mean, I would kind of think it would not, but,
So that's a good question. And I got another graph that'll show you. That should work.
Saying if
Kind of
it's-
where we're at now.
yeah.
So even if we did get the benefit of those 6
Right.
bays, is that like a 1%
Yeah, because
or 1/10?
if there's no like underlying obligation that you need a rec, somebody somewhere needs a rec
Right.
to tie her into some regulatory construct, but you don't. So in some ways you should sell them because it would give you a better deal if you don't have to retire
In
them
terms of financial accounting,
Yeah,
financially.
not for carbon accounting. but for
Yeah.
financial.
The advantage from a climate point of view is that if Dominion doesn't take your recs, it's got to go somewhere else or potentially build out, more solar. It's
Wouldn't that be that's a good thing?
Yeah.
that would be a good
Right.
thing. But because it takes your recs, it doesn't have to do that.
So
You want-
Dominion's
It's-
taking it back,
it's-
not third party.
It's out there slurping out all the recs it can get from
Hmm.
public schools so that it doesn't have to build more solar.
Yeah,
Right.
makes sense.
I was gonna say, that is that side of it,
So provide some relief from their obligation to build.
to become 100% green.
But these
But
contracts,
there's not a detriment to the school.
No, the only thing is I can't claim, it's like I'm getting brown power, even though that's not true.
The detriment is that the school somehow has to figure out, how to offset that brown electricity.
That brown electric.
And so it's not doing it by hanging on to its recs. Somewhere down the road, in order to reach its goals, it's got to figure out another way.
Those are just internal goals, not
No one
regulatory
goes to jail,
goals.
right?
Yeah.
These are all.
are these perpetual contracts or 20-year or 10-year?
25 years is what we've signed for the 6 schools.
And that was signed 5 years ago or roughly, or
Yeah,
married schools?
it varies as when the school kind of came online and when we signed that actual lease.
So we're still at least 15 years away from any of these things expiring.
Any of these expiring. There is things in the contract where you can buy out the array. But then on the other hand, and I can talk a little bit about the difference between us owning the solar array and then a PPA provider. Owning the solar array has some of its challenges, I would say. I use the word challenges because the challenges are, no,
Okay, yeah, just,
there we go.
Okay,
The challenges is maintenance. So when an inverter goes wrong or something gets grounded and we don't have anybody in-house to work on the solar arrays. We don't have anyone trained, especially safety-wise. So we got to kind of outsource that. The nice thing with PPAs is if the solar array stops working, we just don't pay the electricity. If it's not generating electricity, I don't have to pay you. So they're Johnny on the spot, noticing and monitoring 24/7, how's the array working? So diving a little more deep down in here so you guys can see kind of what we're talking about. So up top, here's our goal, 100% renewable electricity at 2030 in our strategic plan. Right now, our grid and the solar power we use is sitting at about 54 million kilowatt hours. So the total solar electricity generated, this comes from all 10 of those arrays, although Granite Cardinal just started in December of 2024, is about 3.2 million kilowatt hours. So that sits at about 5 to 6%. I would say that's how far we got it. But once again, I can't claim all that as green power. I dropped down another just to show how much solar electricity is used on site at all our buildings. The difference between the 3.2 and the 2.4, that's just the amount that got exported out to the grid. And then I have at the bottom, and that's our green power used on site. And so that, when I use the word green power, that's solar power that we own the RECs on. And that's actually used on site. I think technically I can take credit for what got exported to the grid and offset my electricity, but it's still sitting at about, I'd say 1 to 2% of our total use. So that's kind of where we're at now. On the other column, I wanted to talk to the team about this is how do we get to that goal of becoming 100% renewable and how would APS want to do that? So the first easy way out, I would say, is Dominion Green Power. You can purchase Dominion Green Power. Right now, they're selling it at about half a cent a kilowatt hour. So do the quick math on that. That's 300 grand a year. And that means we got to pay 300 grand every year to Dominion to claim to have the piece of paper that says we're 100% renewable electricity. And that's an option. And now that's 300 grand every year that might keep going up. That gets taken away from our educational needs and where we want to put our money as a school district. The solar PPA idea of what we've kind of been going down, and it varies depending on school to school. It varies depending on the interconnection problems. I'm sure you guys know about that as well at Dominion. But I want to give an example of Randolph Elementary. We got a fresh roof on that. It's a nice big roof. So I really want to get solar on there. This was what our solar PPA provider sent out to me to kind of just gauge. Now, this was a couple months ago. So the climate has obviously changed with federal incentives, tariffs. But the General Assembly did do us a nice thing with the school bill, I will say. But this is what we're kind of working with. Let's start at the bottom. The average APS electricity rate is about 0.1239 per kilowatt hour. They'll offer us 1181 for the PPA rate, but APS does not retain those recs. So once again, we're still at that brown power. That right there, and you can't totally go apples to apples because bills are structured weird, and I'd have to dig down. But to me, that looks just about even. So I could get a solar array on this school, and the utility bill is not going to go up for this building. And hopefully, that's a locked-in rate, 0% escalation. I got a feeling Dominion's always going to keep rising a little bit. And throughout the 25 years, the school district actually saved money that way. I asked them, I said, hey, what if we wanted to own the recs or retain the recs? They offered me their best deal was $12.57. So it's already over what Dominion's charging us. And they said, we're going to have a 2% escalation on it. So when you look at it that way, okay, we can retain the recs, but now I'm going to be paying probably a couple more thousand, maybe close to 10,000 a year just to have and claim that amount of renewable energy. So that you can see the cost. I did a quick math there. So the cost is above what Dominion Green Energy is purchasing. I will say the other benefit that I like about going with solar PPAs a little bit is the PPA provider also in our contract, they give us dashboards. So we have solar dashboards. I forgot to highlight that there, but that's a great tool for kids to look at, for teachers to look at, for community members. And you can see that. We've had dashboards at a couple of the schools we own. Those are the first things that break. And they're the hardest to maintain. And I'm trying to figure it out myself. I never thought I didn't need to study computer engineering, but I might go back to school to figure out how IS and all that works and how to host websites. But that's a tough thing. So that's kind of where I'm at. And what's the best way and the most physically responsible way, I would say, to get solar power, to promote renewable energy, to help the industry out without affecting educational needs that the school district wants.
Tanner, Jimmy Curran had a question for you.
I'll have questions.
Yeah.
Well, thanks. Thanks. I appreciate the presentation. Hi, I'm Jamie. I was a solar energy project engineer before I came out here a decade ago. So I have a lot of questions, but the first one is, can you share what happens, how long is the term of the PPA and what happens at the end of that term? Do you have an option to buy the system? Do you have to pay to remove it? Do you just have to renew because it's not your infrastructure? Let us know. Can you let us know how long it lasts and what happens at the end?
Yes. So the way our current contracts are structured, they're 25 years lease agreements. And then at the end of those 25 years, they will sell the array to us for $1.
Well done. Good negotiation. I like that.
And then we have it. At the end, then you got to think at the end of 25 years, those arrays are tough. We can say, no, we don't want to buy the array. And then they're responsible for removing the array.
Recycling the panels. Right?
Well, usually that's that they charge for that, but if it's not the case, that's great. I would just say, in the 25 years, it would be a good idea. I mean, you have good concerns about managing like the interface, those dashboards. Over the course of the 25 years, I imagine the dashboard will change, but they should be able to, at some point, just give a little info session on how they do it. And then when it becomes, Arlington Public School property, you'll already have all the understanding of whatever dashboard they have at that time to be able to manage it without too much complexity. Hopefully, it's also very simplified by then. And then the other thought I had is for the PPA rate with the RECs, do they have an option where you have a higher fixed rate rather than an escalator? Because I will say an escalator is like a predatory tactic. There's no reason on the installer side. They make their money in the first 7 years and then structures flip and all that. The escalators are really just a cash grab for the developers, and they could perhaps offer you a flat PPA rate that's slightly higher than whatever the current rate is, but it shouldn't even be based on the current rate. It should be based on the cost of the system. So it's also interesting if you're able to share sort of like the cost per watt, install price over time with these systems. Thank you.
I think those are great points there. I don't have that cost per watt, but I think that's intriguing. Good thought for me to move forward with. And I do agree with you. That's what they offered me, the 2% escalation. And in my head as well, I said, I'm going to come back and say, what would it look like for us to own the RECs at 0%? And then play that over 25 years. And does APS start winning money that way?
And just a quick point that electricity rates are expected to go up really significantly, more than 2%.
So they
are.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're really looking at a pretty low rate there
When you're
over time.
when you're doing your analysis that way. Absolutely.
But that's how that's a selling tactic that it convinces you that it's a good deal, but you shouldn't be comparing. You shouldn't be offering to pay more over time with the anticipation that the utility company's expenses are going to get more over time, because you're buying infrastructure, or you're investing in infrastructure. That price doesn't change from the date it's put in. So when if they're talking about an escalator, they're essentially saying this system will cost more over time, which is not the case.
Which not
Right?
yeah.
You have to be able to separate what might happen outside the world with you're making an investment in infrastructure on your property. Thanks.
A quick question, just clarification. So the half a cent in number 1 per kilowatt hour. So that's on top of the fourth bullet on the bottom is what they would charge. Like the base rate is 12, so it would be 13 or whatever, 12.9 or whatever.
Correct.
So,
They charge me electricity, then they add that on, and then now I have a renewable energy credit for that kilowatt hour.
and you mentioned RECs are expensive in Virginia, but compared to Maryland and DC, they're really cheap. So you're comparing it to Texas RECs or RECs traded in other markets?
Oh, yeah, I was comparing it to the Texas RECs.
Regionally, they're very cheap. I would love to have a source, but it's all by state policy, right? And
Yeah.
that's the value of them.
DC, I do know is top.
Paying 200 something, just so folks know, I get about $45 a rec on my solar system. I locked into a 3-year contract. In DC, they're paying 200 some odd bucks per rec. Maryland is somewhere between 175 or something. It's how aggressive the policy is at the state level that the utility has to meet to meet their portfolio standard. So it's really not worth that much, relatively speaking. And dashboards, they should not be charging for dashboards. I have a dashboard on my phone. It comes with your inverter, and
Yeah,
they constantly update it. So that should not be an expense that you have to take on.
it's not an expense. It's built into the PPA. It's no
It's not
addition.
very good.
I have sent you like 5 emails about the different times that it's broken down. I'm always trying to go and get the latest ratings and show the kids.
it breaks down.
Yeah. And then it does periodically break down, because I do regularly check it and everything with the kids.
I have a question about, have you explored the feasibility of batteries?
We have not. I personally have not. I think there could be some benefit there. Once again, are we going to be the ones buying and maintaining the battery? Is that something maybe I could work with my PPA provider? That could be an option, just to keep our electricity bill down. I'm not paying so much more on the Dominion side of things. But in general, I say most of our PPAs, they don't very little goes out to the grid at the end of the day. They're not big enough to withstand all of the electricity the building needs. Usually we're using most of it, except for maybe high summertime when the building isn't even being used. And
So the solar array isn't covering your whole energy
usage, it's tough.
I bet you though, it would be cheaper than $300,000 a year.
A battery.
Yeah,
I honestly don't know the prices, but
I think that you can get a Tesla super pack for $100,000.
yeah.
Am I right on that?
You can get a home one for 20,000 or 8,000, depending on the size. But I don't think, I mean, if the point of getting storage is just to have the ability to store, it's not really, and the value in storage now is sort of like the arbitrage between peak rates and off usage rates, and schools are done at 3 p.m., right? So I don't know if they ever use electricity at peak hours, but they could sell it at peak hours, you know, if they've been saving it up. That would be the thing to look into, to see if their rate plans allow that, for example.
Well, one problem I know, like on Jefferson's usage, that like we with our the 325, that counts. I think it was that 325 solar panels. That, yeah, those panels account for like at peak use. They only provide about 11% of the school's energy or so, which really shocked me that it was that that low and everything. So. I'm just kind of curious about ways to further expand that and get, so it's not just 10 schools, but it's, all 38 schools or every school that it makes sense to get those panels. So how to expand them, and then where they are there, how that they become a bigger ratio of the energy usage.
I will say Jefferson, it is just on the roof.
Okay.
And the only reason why we just did it on the roof, because that was the one place they could have structural integrity. I think the rest of the school, the roof was a little old. They didn't want to put a 25-year lease on it. But the gym got new, and they actually had to reinforce it a little bit. And so it's actually just the roof.
Yeah, it's
that has-
just gym roof.
So that's why it's only, like you said, about 10%, 11%.
Is the age of the roof really the main kind of consideration? Like, is that the major factor, the limiting factor for whether you consider a PPA for a facility, or is it like, what are the other considerations?
I would say, roof lifetime is absolutely the biggest one. PPA providers don't want it after 5 years usually. And honestly, your roof takes about 30 years. That's your life expectancy. You want your braze to go at least 25 years. So usually when there's a new roof, that's the best time. If it's 10, 15 years in, the benefit cost ratio doesn't match up that way.
I had one other question last year in Virginia, it became possible to do solar leases, which is not paying for the electricity, just paying for the installation. No one's billing or charging on a kilowatt hour basis. And I'm wondering whether that has been looked at for the schools, or if there are installers that are even offering that as an option to schools, because that could also potentially reduce your costs and also help the negotiation period, because you're just getting essentially a loan, and you can play with all the terms of the loan in whatever way is of best interest to the budget for the public schools.
So we're paying someone to install solar, is what you're saying. That's what the lease is,
And operate it. And so that the lease is it's a similar idea that you could sign like a 25-year lease or a 20-year lease or whatever it is. And you're paying for the functionality of the solar over the course of that lease. They're not guaranteed. They can model what it's going to produce, but they're not charging you on a kilowatt hour basis. They're operating the system, and they're charging a flat monthly rate.
And if the functionality of their array falls apart, do I not have to pay them? Is that voided?
No. They own it. They maintain it for you. It's kind of like if you had a mortgage on your house, the bank actually owns it for those 30 years, but you're maintaining it. But in this case, with the solar lease, you could, it would depend on does the installer offer you solar leases at schools, and will they maintain that product for the duration of the lease, which is should be an option.
that's a,
And then with that, you can much more easily set your budget because you don't have to worry about how much energy am I going to use, this and that. You know, it's a fixed payment every month for the next X number of years.
X number of years. No, that's an interesting concept. I'm not too familiar with that, but I'll investigate that just to see how that would play out for us and maybe be a good avenue. I appreciate that because I was gonna say these are three options I have. I know there's other ways to get renewable energy projects approved.
Just got one comment here. This is a really high level conversation. Most of it's over my head. Trying to keep up with this. Knowledge is excellent, really impressed. But what you started out with, if I remember, you said one option, and you didn't talk about it, pay $300,000 a year and buy a bunch of RECs. And your staff, you're knowledgeable, your decision makers, not so knowledgeable, may or may not take staff recommendations. If I was an ignorant decision maker, superintendent or school board, somebody told me, oh, we could do all these complicated things. We could just spend $300,000 a year and buy RECs, and then we'll be able to say that we've met our goal of being carbon neutral by 2030. And wouldn't that be a triumph? And APS has a $600 million a year, 800, thank you, budget, and $300,000 a year sounds like just a pittance in order to be able to brag that we've met our. I'm not a fan of RECs. I'm a change alarmist. I'm not a fan of RECs in any way, shape, or form. But for the decision makers, they might be like, "Oh, that's a great option. Let's do it." So you think about that. That's all.
I do like solar arrays on schools. I do like student living.
Solar arrays on
I do.
schools.
I
Yes.
don't love
But that's
RECs
the
as a
item.
measure of whether or not you're using clean energy.
Yeah,
Have you thought about geothermal?
or energy.
Or heating and cooling?
Absolutely. So, and we do it at
Okay.
multiple schools, and I'll go back and point out the site UUIs, and the buildings that are operating best have geothermal heating.
Okay, so that's already
Absolutely.
wherever it's feasible is already.
But
I'm
is it,
personally a big fan. It's just,
It's feasible.
not worse, yeah. I mean, it's not every building.
it's not every
It
building.
exists some
And they have
places, but-
made decisions not to do it with trade-offs that were apparently trumping factors like sequencing of the construction and so on at the new career center building. They rejected
Hmm.
the recommendation for geothermal that was put out at the beginning by one of your contractors. That was, I think, before your time. I think, or maybe,
When there's a new construction or a renovation, would geothermal be like standard on that? Because that's the best time to put it in.
Absolutely. When you use,
Instead of running a gas line.
when you're using capital money, that is the best time to put it in. It is I would say, restriction on space. Do we have the space? And then it is the factor of, do we have the money to put it in? Because geothermal wells are very expensive to build. I will say Hoffman Boston Elementary School is under a major infrastructure renovation right now, and they are putting geothermal.
Great.
They're digging wells
Great.
there for that
Well,
one. The
are
cor-
they gonna recommend as an option? That's what they said yesterday at the work session, that they're gonna present to the board cheaper options. You know, if taking away geothermal is one of those cheaper options.
Is a line item. I'm not sure on that. That'd be a good thing to watch and follow, because that is what they do. They will go out the bid and they'll say, and then here's how much it would cost for geothermal. Here's how much it
I'm
would
gonna
cost.
present it to the board. I wanna make sure the community knows these numbers and facts before, rather than
I mean,
just
that's
like, you
a
know,
great way to shift a capital cost to operations and maintenance ongoing, social cost of carbon for the region and
I
globally.
know you're gonna talk about. Unless you wanna talk about it right now.
One more and then let's move on. Want Tanner to be able to finish the
So-
presentation.
Building on Doug's point, and I like some RECs. I like,
I like a
Solar
voluntary
banks with
market that injects capital.
additionality. And the concern and I also take his point, 200,000, half cent per kilowatt hour. And then, you could put all the solar on rooftops that you want. And you're still gonna have another 90% left, right? So you gotta have some kind of big solution. It could be a VPPA at some point if that comes back as an opportunity.
But yeah,
That would be ideal. But until then, something like the green power purchase. But when I mentioned about the green power purchases, that's not Solar Rex. That most likely that's their product that has like 40% biomass
Yeah,
and some old hydro, and
yeah.
it's not a great rec.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because there's tiers and levels to Rex.
So
I'm
I'm wondering if there is a higher quality, what a higher quality rec would cost.
What that would look like
And
as
in
well.
minimal, what the VEPCA, is this the only option under the VEPCA?
So that's actually, yeah, that's an interesting one. So this is Dominion's, this can go to anybody. It's not a VEPCA, it's a jurisdiction. That is something we're talking about with VEPCA. And we are going through a new contract negotiation, not this year, but the following year. And that's something I've raised to everybody. And I said, I would like Dominion to kind of give us some options, or, let VEPCA have a couple different options for if we wanted to buy.
What about electric school buses?
Oh, we'll get there.
This is later in the
Yeah,
presentation. Let's move on.
We'll touch it.
Yeah. Poor Tanner.
No, I love these.
The energy committee get.
I try and talk about this at home, and no one wants.
Home audience, yeah.
You're the nerd out.
Yeah. All right, so great segue.
Oh,
Great segue. So let's talk about transportation here. So we'll start the APS fleet. We're sitting at about 175 school buses. We have right now 6 battery electric school buses. We're awaiting 2 more. And we were able, so we had 3 early on, and then we bought 5 using the EPA clean school bus rebate, which was huge. And I think that's the only reason we were really able to do it. We all know electric school bus is about twice the cost of a normal diesel bus, I would say. And then the one thing I want to bring up, and I don't like it, but the reality is 2 of our buses already, so now we're down to 4, are back in the shop. And we've had trouble with buses before. First 3 we've had trouble. We just got 3 more, and now 2 of them went back to the shop as well. And we are struggling on runtime, and I would say we're barely even pushing 2/3 on runtime. And that's tough for our transportation team. They have a strategic goal of hitting 95% on-time arrival, pickup for students. And so operation is a big key. Granted, though, I think it's a new technology. We get better, things happen, but I just want to make sure that I'm not totally sure what the problems are, but they have to keep going back to the shop, and they're just not running.
It would be really interesting to us to learn, because we've been hearing this for a couple of years now.
Right.
That there've been reliability issues. And whether that's software,
Yeah.
whether that's,
Or manufacturing, like what's going on?
or are they lemons and it's something different every time?
No, that's a good note. I'm gonna make a note of that, because I think that is important to know.
I assume you own them too, not like through a third party. There are some that.
Yeah, we own the school bus. Yeah.
I don't think Arlington County is unique in having problems with electric school bus rollouts.
No, not at all.
My
Not from what I
impression
heard.
is that a lot of different localities are having
I
problems with their first electric school buses.
It's news to me, but.
Yeah, I mean, I have looked online and not found this kind of experience.
I visited a site in San Diego that's doing this, the school district, and that actually is connected. They plug the buses in at night and send electricity back to the grid too. And they've had in fact, their maintenance costs are way down. Their garage, you can eat off the floor. It's like, I mean, and it's super clean and nice. It's not grease and stuff everywhere. They haven't had these maintenance issues at all. And in fact, we heard just the opposite with the art buses, that the natural gas buses keep breaking down. And one of the reasons and that with no replacement parts, one of the reasons they wanted to go, one of many reasons they wanted to go to electric. So we could talk more offline. I'll give you some background.
No, absolutely. So that's kind of where we're at on electric school buses at the moment. Our white fleet vehicles, those are trucks, vans going around. We have about 18 electric vehicles for that. Trucks, vans, sedans, it's a mixture of both. We actually have an electric forklift now. They won't let me drive that for some reason. I know, right? I wanted to. I see it soon. I see. There you go. We do have 2 hybrids as well. And then some other APS I wanted to call out that I think is important is the Arlington Transit. So we partnered with ART and they provide iRide for fare free cards to all APS students. So any APS student can ride an Arlington bus for free. And they actually added the Metro buses in the Arlington County, which I think is great. It's really growing, I would say, like future public transit riders. I mean, sometimes you're scared at first to get on, and I think it's good to help get kids on board. Got over 6,000 cards out there right now. Up at the top corner here, I won't play it because I like in the conversation too much, but there's a video called Walk, Bike, and Roll to School Day. Our transportation demand manager, he does a lot of safety around, but he also works on this. He does 2 big days a year, one in the fall and one in the spring. And it's a great video. I think it's important to try and think of ways we don't have to use cars. And I mean, we talk about how Arlington's the most walkable, bikeable county in the United States. And then we see just a line of drop-off single passenger cars.
All
I cause
idling,
traffic.
yeah,
I know you've seen it. So different ways like that. And if you have ideas to help us to kind of limit that as well, I think are big ideas.
I have a suggestion. So if you are in the role of changing the status quo, you're going to need good data in order to pitch new things, right? Changing the status quo. And my understanding is that APS does not collect data on current actual usage of the routes, meaning the number of kids who are actually using, not the ones allocated to a route, but the ones who are showing up. Is that correct? And is that a piece of data that you think could be useful in the future? Again, maybe not just like, okay, this is what we need and how do we meet these needs, but do we actually need what we say we need?
Is it so? If I'm hearing you correctly, you're asking, do we have a reliable data on how each kid gets to school that day?
No,
Ridership on bus.
Or at least,
right.
Ridership on
if-
bus.
So if there are 100 families that are allocated to a route, and every day, like, 2 buses are assigned, 50 kids to 2 buses, and 12 of those 100 kids use the bus. Do you know that?
From my understanding, I do not know that
Do
information.
you want to know that?
I think that
Because APS is not collecting that information currently. And so how do we make good decisions about wasting resources? Also, it's not efficient to waste.
I agree with you, and that's actually something. So the superintendent's advisory committee, that's something we've talked about, and how do we get that good data? And so we can walk down that thought. How do we get that data? Is it then the bus driver's responsibility as
Doesn't have to be-
they drive around and say, okay, Timmy Road today?
You could probably put just like a little,
Okay, when the bus rolls up, how many kids get off? Just write it down.
Take a couple snapshots.
yeah, some snapshots, or you
17.
could do like a
2-3 rides a
little
year.
laser
2 kids on
pointer
this
that
bus and 5
interrupt,
kids on
like, how many times the light gets interrupted by people coming on or,
Coming off. Okay, that could be a good way to try and do it. That's like I said, we're trying to figure out ways to track that. The easiest and simplest was we sent out a survey to all families and students and said, hey, how does your child normally get to school? To try and get that, had about a 7% response rate.
right.
And then
It's different from morning to evening, so you can't even ask that question of, how does your kid usually get to school? If usually we drop them off in the morning and they walk home, well, what's the average of that? How do I answer that question?
how do you answer that question? Yeah.
0.5% bus or 0.5 bus?
Right. And yeah, I think it's tough to try and get that data. And how would we get that data? The one that I can tell you is sit at a school in the morning and watch how many cars come up and drop.
That's
And
what-
that tells you.
But we should talk about buses. like,
Buses.
They come off the bus, you just.
Yeah,
count
because
it.
my kids are supposed to.
Who
walk
counts the kid?
Their
I
kindergarten.
have somebody, I don't know.
We gotta.
I have very limited staff, right?
Well,
The
it doesn't
assistant
have to be
principal,
people.
Vice principal.
You could just have, like I said, some sort of little laser thing that if you interrupt the light, it means someone has passed through on their way onto the bus. And, there's gotta be ways to do this, but if we stay in the dark and we just keep insisting, oh my gosh, we need 159 buses to do things. I mean, I've talked to Lance for a while and I mean, you got for other operations purposes, it would be useful for you to know, so that you don't waste very scarce bus drivers. You know, the scarcity is bus drivers more than money, believe it or not. So, like, can we get this data?
Can we get that?
I think it would serve your purposes. It would also serve other purposes.
No, I do agree. I think
Let-
that would be good. data.
Let's let Tanner keep going. I wonder too,
Thank you.
you know, at some point, would it be helpful for this committee to make some recommendations or to back up or to provide some kind of written documentation on recommendations like this to say, it's not just Tanner being like, we want this. It's,
No, I definitely think that would, I definitely think that would help. I definitely think that would,
I had a talk just last week with the guy who's the chair of the committee you just mentioned.
Eric Tilden,
Yes, I had a nice talk with her last week. So
that's great.
anything we can do to help coordinate or
Yeah.
facilitate or share information or get together.
Yeah, Eric's been a great chair. I really enjoyed him so far. He does kind of my work for hotels. Still waiting for a hotel voucher, but I haven't gotten it. The trade optimization study, I figured you guys might ask about this. This just came out from the yesterday's pre-CIP. So as you may have known, it was identified as a placeholder in the 25-34 CIP. They did do a phase 1 study that assessed the opportunities and the challenges. There's a lot that goes on at the trade center. There's a lot of things to consider: parking, safety. There's a lot of different moving parts all at the trade center. And they came back with some ideas, and then they outlined several phased options for further exploration. There's a second phase study for phase 2. It would require kind of a joint effort between the county and APS and commitment on, I think, both sides for funding on the CIP. And then, so right now it's recommended as a continued placeholder in the upcoming 2027 36 CIP. I will say, you know, there's some physical constraints, obviously, on our budget. I know we were talking about the 300,000. Is that, and is that really so much compared to 800 million? I will say this past budget season, we did remove 26 positions, and some positions went down from 12-month to 11-month to 10-month. So even though it's easy that way, we are taking away, you know, resources that other divisions need. And then the last thing is, if you take a look at our budget, I think we're prioritizing some feasibility studies. But the other thing I did want to mention, if you look at our budget, our CIP debt ratio is the second highest after employees. So it's personnel is our number 1, and then our second highest cost is the debt, service debt on our capital fund. So that's just something to keep in mind, you know, for sustainability, for how our budget's going to be affected. A little bit touching on waste here, recycling. So we work with
Question before we
Chip.
on from buses. On the parking study, the question that actually 2 questions, both of them quick. Do you know where reserve buses are? Because there's such a tight spacing issue at the right there. Are reserve buses parked somewhere else, or are they all on site there?
I do not know where the reserve buses are parked. I would assume at the trade center. That's my
I'm
belief at
assuming
all.
that too, and I've just never seen it discussed. And then, is that phase 1 study available somewhere? Is it online or something that?
Yeah, I believe it was last May 30. It's like the May 30th, I want to say, they came out and they had kind of not the complete study, but they kind of had a general idea of what came out of the study. And that was the superintendent's when he was going through the CIP. That was on there.
That's like
if I
a
remember.
PowerPoint.
Yeah, if I remember. I don't think there's actual designs, drawings out there that I've seen.
Thanks.
Absolutely. A little bit on waste here. So recycling, follow the same county standards, single stream, no glass. Actually, down on the right was over at Gunston, and Department of Environmental Services came in and did a little recycling outreach. I'm meeting up with some of their recycling outreach people, I think, next week. So I'm kind of excited to tackling that, right? We don't have individual site data, even though a lot of people ask me, and I wish we do, but we do have a district-wide, and we're sitting at about, I'd say, 20% on recycling rate. So I'd like to bring that number up. Honestly, I'd like to get some data on that and maybe do some scope 3 emissions and look at that, because I think people care when they can see data and they can see effects. Composting, another big thing. Arlington County is killing it with the pickup on the residential. So now everybody at our schools want to do it. Obviously, there's some costs on that. But there are, I'd say, two groups that are pushing ahead and being innovative. So Discovery Elementary got a grant their own. The PTA went out and got a grant. So they actually hired their own composting hauler. And there's some, I'm excited to kind of go through that data to look at their cost to see how much waste is compostable at an elementary school. And it depends. Every elementary school is a little bit different when you think about it. So I'm excited about that. There's the Arlington Students for Climate Action. I think that's a student group with Eco Action, Sierra Club, and the Faith Alliance for Climate Change. They have some grant money, and they've been talking to me about doing some pilot composting. They were looking at Taylor, thinking about starting this spring, but I think it was a little too late. And so we're going to regroup in the fall to hopefully do something there. Food share tables. I'm not sure if you heard about these, but these exploded at APS this school year, and it was led by the champion, Mary Sanders, at the Healthy Community Action Team at Arlington. She's been great. I helped out with a food audit at Abingdon a couple weeks ago. But the food share table model is simple in nature, is essentially any uneaten, unsealed food the kids bring up, and it's sitting there in these baskets kind of there at the end of the lunch table where you can throw away your food, but instead, if you have those items, you can put it in those baskets. So then at any time, if kids are hungry during the day and sometimes after school activities of that sort, kids can come around and get that food. So I think it kind of hits a 2-in-1 of both food insecurity and then kind of reducing our food waste as it goes down. And we've had a lot of schools pick that up, and she's really been a champion. I love it when people come in the schools and really try and make a difference and an impact. The last thing I was going to share, APS in Arlington County did apply for a Swiffer grant, a solid waste grant. In our minds, what we kind of proposed is we wanted to expand that food share table model at all our schools, and then we wanted to work on pilot composting and growing that out for the 3 years of the grant. Obviously, who knows? We're supposed to hear in end of June or July. Not holding my breath. Maybe we will. Not holding my breath. So the Sustainability Liaison Program, this is my favorite thing about APS, my favorite part about the job. It kind of resembles, I think, the Get to Green app Rich shared with me, which I've seen too. So I'd like to hear what you guys see in that and what you would like to see at APS. But the Sustainability Liaison Program started as a recommendation out of the Superintendent's Advisory Committee, and it started in 2016 with about 10 pilot schools. And now we just completed our 3rd year where all schools have a sustainability liaison. It's been fully funded. We have one amazing sustainability liaison here at the table. They are volunteer positions, educators at the school. It usually happens to be a science teacher, but we encourage it doesn't have to be. We have music teachers, PE teachers. We really want it to be, sustainability isn't science, it's everything. You get a small stipend, and I'm going to say modest stipend for the amount of work these educators do. It honestly is amazing. They get some recertification hours. The one thing we ask them to do is put on one sustainability activity at their school. We ask them to attend our 4 quarterly meetings, and we just kind of ask them to help facilitate different sustainability. You don't have to put everything on, but kind of be that point person, the sustainable person at your school. And I'm put a couple slides up here. They go above and beyond. They do so much. Kip, I know we missed our last meeting, but I always like to say it. I work every day to try and drop carbon emissions, but the work you guys do and teaching kids and getting them connected to nature is compound interest in dropping carbon emissions down that way. So it really makes me excited. A couple slides here. So there's Thomas Jefferson right there. All the different things they've been doing. They partner with a bunch of organizations as well. I see Eco Action down there. This is Barcroft. And mind you, these presentations were March 18th. And so this was even before Earth Day. So there was even more activities that happened after this. I really love the Chesapeake Bay Foundation boat trip. I've heard about these. You can see the picture down there, but I've never gotten on one yet. So those are really cool ones. Taylor, once again, all the different things that they've done. And then you can see right now here, the new stuff they tried to add this year. It really is, I think, bringing environmental literacy, connecting kids to the nature, and very impactful, and what the schools are out there to do our best at. So talk right there, finish with the environmental literacy plan. Dot Lees, our science supervisor, he kind of built this and helped it grow and got it implemented kind of at APS. You can see it's based on our strategic plan, the Virginia Standards of Learning, and then the Virginia Environmental Literacy Guides. It identifies the kind of resources we have, APS, at our disposal and how we can use that to enhance environmental literacy. It touches on different SOLs for different subjects, science, social studies, health, and physical education. And then even the big thing is also meaning for watershed education experiences. I believe when we first started the environmental literacy plan, 10 teachers or so got trained on that, and that they've been around, and that's helped grow as well. This full slide deck for the sustainability liaisons are online. I highly encourage you to take a look at that. It's really incredible what they do and what these educators do on their own above and beyond to connect students.
Does the watershed education regulatory requirements for Chesapeake Bay protection?
Regulatory requirements. What kind of regulatory?
So like APS has to, I guess APS has to meet the Chesapeake Bay watershed, like the different runoff requirements.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So
And so I didn't know if that was meeting some of those regulatory. It may not be, but.
I would say yes, the stormwater factor. That's what I'm happy about. So we have our own MS4 permit, and there is the Chesapeake Bay TMDL action load, and that's us required to reduce our nutrients to protect it.
Okay.
In the MS4 program, part of it is education and outreach that you have to do, and that's what that hits.
So you are meeting regulatory requirements.
With some of that, and I have to do other mechanisms, and it's not just one thing. You got to do multiple things.
Trying to put that together.
No, absolutely.
And then Tanner, one thing I wanted to say on this environmental literacy plan, which I think is fantastic and everything, is also including math in there. I really want math in the data piece of it, because I think what that does is it does a bunch of different things for getting the kids to part of the thing is data collection is a big part of the new standards of learning, to focus on that. But if the kids do that and apply that for energy and seeing like the solar panels, they have that concrete experience, something they can look at and see at those 10 schools. But if they can take ownership of that information and do the mathematical calculations on that, I think that could be really, really powerful, especially for them to go home and tell their families about it too. So that word gets spread and everything. But I really would just speak up. And also I'm speaking for myself here to remind myself too, to just stress this again, because we brought it up in several different meetings and some things have happened with it, but I'd like it to be more consistent, systemic on focus on the connection between math and energy and environmental education.
I like that. Thank you. All right, so I kind of got less pictures here.
Quick question, how do we get to do one of those, talk to the students about science and energy and everything? Is there a volunteer sign up?
There's not necessarily a volunteer sign up. You can email me to start and I can help you out. And the school and community relations is actually updating, renewing their partnerships website right now. And they're going through and kind of making a streamlined process for anybody that wants to volunteer or wants to provide resources to APS. And that'll kind of be the new one-stop shop of, hey, I have this to offer. Hey, I want to volunteer. And then you go through that process there with them. So
very cool.
That's coming down the pipeline. But if you're really eager, don't be afraid to email me and I can help you get connected as well.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. So strategic plan. You can see we have a bunch of different stuff in the strategic plan. What we care about here is in our operational excellence lead, the environmental sustainability standards. We have 5 of them in our strategic plan, and you can see where we are now in FY 2024. So 75% of our schools with a site energy use intensity at or below 56. Right now, we're at 22 of 37 schools. I said lease facilities not included. That's Arlington Community High School. And the idea is if we're leasing the facility, can we really change it and renovate it? So I think it's best to leave that out. Reduce natural gas consumption by 20% from our baseline levels. You can see we're at 2007, 2024, we're about 9%. And then I just learned the square foot adjustment would actually help us reach that goal. So now let's go to 40%, right? And reduce the carbon dioxide emissions. We're sitting there at about 37%. If we did square foot adjusted, we'd be sitting around 50%. Achieving renewable electricity. Like I said, it's a tough goal and it depends how we want to count it. If we want to talk about total renewable energy generated at our facilities, maybe not necessarily REX owned, we're up to 5 to 6%. If we just want to talk about RECs and what I can legally claim as renewable energy credit, we're sitting at about 1 to 2%. The last goal is transition 5% of the current fleet. That's 9 buses to zero emissions, with a goal to reach 100% by 2050. Where we have 8 right now. Well, we have 8 expected to start next school year. We're waiting, like I said, those 2 school buses that have already been purchased and should get delivered anytime. Last slide here. This is just the capital improvement plan. Sorry, not too many good pictures, but these are all the things identified in the capital improvement plan. We're finishing out security vestibules at 4 schools, renovating, modernizing kitchens. Those kitchens are all electric. There's a collaboration with the Parks Department on the Kenmore Field conversion. We're completing phase 2 of the Heights. That building is occupied, but we're just finishing up parking garage, the field, and accessibility for that building. The Grace Hopper Center campus, that's the new career center. That's the big one going through. That's coming up right now. We have infrastructure projects that are identified. Right now, the one we're working on right now is Hoffman Boston HVAC replacement. And that, like I said, is right now water source heat pumps. Geothermal wells are included. It also includes LED upgrades because we're digging through ceilings and you might as well change the lights while you're doing that. There's the other 4. You got Dorothy Hand roof replacement, Oak Ridge HVAC, Williamsburg roof replacement, Jamestown roof and HVAC. There's talk renovating the Career Center building, the old Career Center building, and moving MPSA into that building. Then I think there's discussion on what we're going to do with MPSA after the fact. A little bit of enhancing school safety. And then at the end, we have feasibility studies at 5 schools. And this is different than our infrastructure projects, although the feasibility study will include, I would say, infrastructure renovations. But the feasibility study is more looking at these schools, looking at these spaces, and do they meet education standards and needs? Because some of our schools were built at different times and things changed. I mean, Jefferson's got.
Oh, we got a host of issues.
Yeah, so that's capital improvement plan. Oh, 1. And there's me. Thank you. So I just want to say, if you do want to get involved, shameless plug, Superintendent's Advisory Committee on Sustainability. Applications are open. I'm sure y'all would love to sit on another committee. But if you do know somebody that cares about this, especially if they have a student at school, I think we really appreciate that. There's always a lot more you can learn. There's APS in the environment, energy conservation, teaching in the classroom, stormwater management. Those are the kind of stuff I manage. And then nice picture of me at Discovery talking about geothermal wells, which was a lot of fun.
Are you circulating this because of those hot links?
Yeah, I'll get those to you guys so you can see them all.
Thank
you. I appreciate the time. Thank you, everybody.
Any global questions for Tanner? We pretty much.
you.
Went through. Did anyone withhold anything, hold anything back?
Just really big picture. So somebody in APS, the superintendent or the school board or somebody like a year ago said, we're going to hit 100% renewable energy by 2030. Is that right? Did I hear that right?
That's our goal.
Goal. And and here we're in 2025, only 5 years, and we're at 5 or 6% generously, if you include the RECs that we really don't know.
Yes.
All right, just
So Doug,
okay. That's all.
It sounds like we're not on track, but
the county did exactly that back in 2018.
I wasn't gonna mention that. I was gonna let that go.
And within 5 years, they had offset all their electricity. So the county government did that.
Okay.
What's your question of?
You tell me there's hope.
There's a chance.
You know,
hopefully there's a loophole.
DPPA is a little tough right now, but
They are a little tougher.
Okay.
I mean, windows open, windows closed, you know.
Thank you.
I guess the question is, can that $300 be used towards something else that's gonna be a better, emission reduction benefit? I don't know. That's
Setting me up for my question.
okay. Go for it.
Have you looked at doing any solar in APS owned fields or parking lots?
Parking lots, I've heard canopies are expensive, just as far as infrastructure. So I haven't really dug down too much in
If
that.
Scott Sklar were here, he would jump on you
He
and
would-
say they are not expensive, and he's installed a whole bunch of them in.
Thank you for changing.
That's true. That's true. They're not expensive. It's easier to do. You don't have to worry about a roof changing it every 25 years. You put it in once, it's good forever.
They
Something I can
also
look into.
would provide shade
Shade is
Yeah.
always nice.
with the new, like, Kenmore fields that will be more useful with I mean,
Sounds like a really good idea.
they provide a little break from if there's a sudden downpour of rain. Like it's a very beneficial thing for the families who are sitting there camped out watching their kids play soccer. There are other aesthetic, like other values.
I wouldn't disagree with that, and the fields I haven't thought about too, but also in the sense of sustainability, there's always competing needs because I have the natural resources asking, where can I plant trees? Where can I plant trees? And a tree can provide shade, and a tree adds other values that helps reduce carbon emissions as well. So, give and take, and a tree is cheaper at the end of the day as well. So I'm not saying it's not a bad idea. I'm not saying I probably will look into it. But the roof space is usually it's sitting there and not being used regardless.
Any other questions? Kip, I'd love to have you chime in if there's anything else you want to add on APS as our resident expert, but something.
Oh, just on the transportation. So it seems like the biggest indicator of how sustainable our transportation really is like how many cars are lining up to drop kids off at school. Is that kind of like the biggest sign that like things are not as sustainable as they should be? Is that kind of your kind of mental metric of?
Yeah, my mental metric is, how many cars are sitting there
Yeah.
idle, driving up,
And is
and
there
how many.
a sense of like what is the barrier that's like keeping people from? Because I mean, I think all schools are pretty much. And like, is it like a safety concern? Are parents concerned about putting their kids on the bus and bullying, or like, is there like what? I guess do we have a sense of like why?
I do not have a sense about that, and we ask about that. I don't know why,
I mean,
I was gonna say time.
I mean, if I have two working parents who have shifts that are offset, one of them's got to be, commuting in somewhere, going somewhere else. And then you're going to have one of them wait for 20 minutes at the bus stop because you can't know for sure when the bus is coming. It's just faster to drop them off.
It's so much more convenient, and there's a lot of, and this is a big, like, old people like me, and there's like, oh, kids were allowed to run free back in the day. And nowadays, kids are not allowed to run free, and putting a kid on a bus is dangerous, and letting a kid walk to school, you gotta be kidding me. There's predators everywhere.
My kid.
So I'm gonna drive my kid and he's safe, and then you get a chance to try to talk to your kid during that 20 minutes, whatever. Kid won't say anything, but, so there's a huge incentives totally unrelated to energy or climate change or anything for why parents drive their kids to school.
Well, just one very
So
simple.
don't feel bad about.
One very simple
Yeah.
thing on that,
Yeah.
on the PR piece of it, on that transfer, an easy thing to grasp is the bike, the walk, bike, roll to school. That should be the very beginning of the school year and everything. We form the habits early and everything.
Yeah.
And not just one off. I think it's like a
First
one off
week.
in April and everything. But if we started that in August, I think it'd be much, it would be a much higher uptake.
Might also bypass difficult information and data collection by offering families like a $5 rebate to decline their bus allocation or something like that. Because if the bus is coming to pick me up and I look and I see it's coming at like either 6:20 or 9:05 or something wildly inconvenient for me, and I know on day one that my kids are not going to take the bus, either going home or coming back, might not need all the data to figure out where your actual ridership is. Just a thought.
That's what you mean there.
The only trick is that on the day that you can't drive them in, you're gonna put that kid on the bus and then it's gonna be overpacked. And you can do that legally, like you can actually do like have people sit in the aisles legally in school buses, but that's gonna
Any
be
risk of overcrowding on those buses?
there's some,
Is there something I was gonna say, honestly, I do not know.
yeah, some
Well,
routes. are-
we've come up with a lot of potential suggestions for Tanner. And we, at the beginning of this year, talked about the possibility of the EC doing sort of formal recommendation. We haven't done any, but our charter does call on this committee to make recommendations to the broader county government, not just the county board, which is C2E2's charge. So I think that we could perhaps benefit Tanner in his position and APS writ large by at least submitting some kind of written recommendations to support some of these considerations. Because you're one of one at APS, right? So maybe that could provide some backup.
We don't want your position reduced.
Do not.
No. Would anyone like to work on that with me?
Are there any particular suggestions?
Yeah, I would be happy to help.
Claire's knowledge of, and she's very modest, but
No,
her knowledge of school issues. Also, I think.
Like, I've come to one meeting, I'm not volunteering for anything, like, what a punishment.
But this is right up her
No.
alley.
Yeah, no, we need to take it up a notch.
Okay, so,
Maybe one more stat to add to this, just your concern about, or it's a good bike.
I'm not saying it's my concern.
No, I think
Yeah.
but if we had something like 99.998 kids have gotten to school without a scratch or a scrape or whatever, that they have biked or
Except
walked.
they haven't.
Yeah.
Except they haven't.
yeah,
That it's actually a
It's getting
huge
hit by-
issue.
Yeah.
A lot of danger along Carlin Springs. And a lot of the, there was actually a parent group that's been fighting the county for 3 years to address Carlin Springs speed and lack of safety and all those elementary schools.
Our
So
neighborhood
it's actually
too.
like,
That's
no,
that
yeah,
Yeah.
like, let's not talk
I mean, I'm
about
not
it.
losing
Yeah,
like
let's get
my
this.
line of sight with my elementary schoolers until they're in custody of someone else, but.
Have you seen, they did start rolling out a lot more speed, signs out there. I don't know if anybody's gotten a ticket yet. But yeah, that,
It was after someone who was crossing with a stroller got hit.
got hit, yeah. So it is it is dangerous around our schools. It is tough.
Okay. With that, I am gonna move us along in our agenda. This was very helpful and timely. Speaking of timely, if we do some kind of recommendation letter, is the timing best around the beginning of the year for us to submit something like that to affect the budget or sooner?
If you're gonna affect the budget, beginning is better, I would say.
Okay,
Yeah, the superintendent's advisory committee, we do a recommendation at the end of the school year.
okay,
Or we usually do a recommendation at the end of the school year, and then we meet with the superintendent at the beginning of the school year.
okay,
Talk about our recommendations and what do we want to work on this upcoming.
okay. So maybe we could,
They're also deciding all summer on how to spend capital funds. And they're gonna make recommendations by September to the board on how to spend
Okay.
capital funds.
okay, so,
So I don't think it's just an operating budget
okay,
set of
okay,
recommendations.
so we'll take this for action.
Yeah, so I'd like to help out.
Okay, great. Thank you, guys. I'm gonna transition, and Tanner, you're welcome to stay and listen, but we're gonna change gears a little bit. So I started out wanting to talk about the virtual power plant legislation that was passed into law recently. And we had a number of conversations about a speaker from Dominion who could speak to these issues. I do have someone on the hook to come next month, but I wanted to start that conversation now. And I mentioned, I think a couple meetings ago, that C2E2 has a number of objectives related to virtual power plants, which is why we're taking such a keen interest in this. But I thought since we're at the mid-year point, it might be good to just kind of give a high-level overview of what C2E2 has tasked the Energy Committee with in its work plan. And I think we're actually in pretty good shape, but I think there are some other things that we want to turn our attention to. So just kind of looking at the work plan, number one is to support a sweeping county board climate change resolution and partner with CPO and county staff on an ambitious climate action plan in 2025. Check on the climate change resolution and ongoing half check on the climate action plan. I think we will get an update in the coming months on the scope of work that CPO has tasked the consultant with and some input into that. So I think that is so far so good. Another task for Energy Committee is to work with the county board and staff to promote local control over energy sources through creation of a choice aggregation or other consumer choice mechanisms. I think virtual power plant would be included in that. To promote on-site renewable energy combined with battery storage and microgrids is another sort of similar related goal. We're also tasked with advising and influencing county staff plans to procure electric vehicles and adopt a strong green purchasing policy. I know that's an objective for the CPO as well. We are tasked with advancing energy resiliency by advising on best practices for microgrids, resiliency hubs, and strategies for encouraging and tapping into energy storage systems and managing demand, aka virtual power plants. So this is kind of scattered throughout, but for me, I have really gotten into the virtual power plant idea lately because I've taken this keen interest in the intersection of energy and AI. And I think it really dramatically changes energy economics in ways that are still kind of being absorbed by the system. So you'll hear a lot about how these new data centers are very energy hungry. They're coming on, and particularly in Northern Virginia. And it's very difficult, particularly in a market region, to not have those additional power needs sort of socialized out to the rest of the grid. So we're already kind of seeing projected increases in energy prices, et cetera. There are a lot of challenges at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission on how to kind of rein this in and prevent data centers from kind of finding ways to advance their energy interests and needs that aren't necessarily at the expense of regular consumers. So for example, a hyperscaler might, work with an independent power producer and enter into a bilateral agreement for the power that's produced by that power plant. It could exit the market with really only needing to give 3 years notice and sell that power to the data center instead of the grid. If this starts to happen en masse, we could really see a kind of a catastrophic collapse of energy markets. But right now, they're really more focused on what does it mean to co-locate a data center with an existing power plant and sort of bypass the transmission system. I think there are larger challenges here that have yet to really manifest themselves. But one of the things that I think both protects individual consumers and reduces costs and becomes more resilient and kind of avoids the inevitable explosion in emissions is a successful pilot and scale of virtual power plants. So I know you guys are all familiar with what these are. We had a speaker a couple of months ago from SMUD talk about their virtual power plant. And it really got me thinking about how that could come to fruition in our area, in Arlington County, because we have a critical mass of existing distributed resources. We have a population that wants to take positive climate action. We have the resources, the sort of massive single family homes, if you will, to really make this something successful. We have a critical mass of electric vehicles, et cetera. So there was a moment when this bill made its way through the General Assembly and looked like it was going to be not quite vetoed by the governor, but severely watered down. So going from a pilot program to a study. And the General Assembly came through for us and it ended up getting signed. And we touched on this a little bit last month when Ivy Main came and talked to us about the overall effect of the impact of the general session. But I think this is actually going to be a lot more significant and might be a real bright spot in what's otherwise kind of a disappointing session. So I wanted to go over the legislation as briefly as possible, but to also kind of dig deep a little bit. So
And Elizabeth, can you just, what was the HB or SB bill number?
SB 1100,
SB
and I think that's the term that it is
going by.
typically going by. There was obviously a House bill as well. It was sponsored by Senator Ghazala Hashmi, by the way, running for Lieutenant Governor, just note. But this was her bill. It's labeled here as a partisan bill from Democrats, but I think it would have had to have bipartisan support to overcome a gubernatorial veto. But the basic requirement of the bill is that Dominion specifically needs to submit a petition to the State Corporation Commission by the end of this calendar year to conduct a pilot program to evaluate methods to optimize demand through various technology applications, including the establishment of virtual power plants. So they need to file something by the end of this year. So the requirement is basically that they need to collect data about how a virtual power plant could work. So they are required to be up to 450 megawatts. It needs to be located in multiple geographic regions. They can use existing or proposed programs. They have to look for funding opportunities from DOE. I don't think they're going to find many. But
Sorry.
yeah, perhaps when this was written, that was a viable thing. But you know, there certainly could be. So they need to look for programs that have at least 15 megawatts, incentivizing residential customers to purchase battery storage. They need to propose a broader electric school bus program relevant to the conversation we just had. That's by 2027. And the commission may require competitive solicitation open to utility-owned and non-utility-owned resources. They can't own the school buses. They can't own consumer batteries. So that's the basic contours of the program. So they need to have a stakeholder process to receive feedback. I don't know, looking at this, whether they need to have a stakeholder process before they submit something to the commission or afterwards. They need to review enrollment and performance incentives, incentives for purchasing battery storage, including in disadvantaged communities, and a preliminary program tariff to enroll. They can incorporate existing programs, which I'll talk about in a minute, and they have to specify compensable grid services for each eligible technology. Later, they have to evaluate the pilot programs, which to me means that they're going to do several of these geographically clustered. And then the commission will initiate a proceeding to establish a permanent program. So I think this is pretty exciting. And I think that this is someplace where we should push for Arlington County to be one of those centralized regions, as well as propose push for specific attributes for the pilot that's conducted here. My personal view is that it seems that it's possible for a third-party aggregator to participate here. I think that there are some models of particularly battery programs where a private company owns the battery, leases it to or sells it to the homeowner for a very low price, but then makes its money aggregating the capacity and energy from those batteries and bidding it into organized markets, which they're allowed to do under FERC Order 2222. My view of that is that the money that is made by a private entity takes away dollar for dollar from the incentive that could be going back to the homeowner. The homeowner should retain that equity. That's very, very important to me. And I think it's something that we should really insist upon as this program moves forward. Because I don't know that there's enough money to go around or room to go around for a company to turn a giant profit and for there to be incentives that are really meaningful for customers to install these devices. But there are models to finance these assets. I think the addition of a battery fundamentally changes the economics of a net metering program versus a virtual power plant. And the advent of a high load growth scenario when we've had 20 years of stagnant or declining load growth really should change the utility's perspective on whether they are advocating and or rather resisting the loss of a customer versus needing every megawatt that's potentially available. And I think that there is also a lot of third-party funding from these tech companies that have money to spend on power and need it to be faster than a utility can actually provide if it's trying to build a central station power plant. So I think that the hyperscalers have an interest in the success of this program and in getting it off the ground as quickly as possible. So I think this is a, win, 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 win situation. And I want it to be successful. And I want Arlington to benefit and to be sort of the epicenter of where this takes place. So I may have mentioned, I can't quite remember, but to the extent that third-party aggregators are able to participate in these, as I mentioned, I'm wary of a sort of corporate third-party selling low-cost batteries where the customer doesn't really have skin in the game or the ability to benefit. My view is, and this probably won't be a surprise to you, that a cooperative is much better suited to have the customer trust, the ownership and governance model needed to really make this successful and to build it out in a way that I think the utility itself would struggle with, two-way billing and working individually with customers. We'll learn more from Dominion when they come talk to us next month. But I think that the co-op model is already used successfully for solar shares and existing solar programs. Maybe they expand to accommodate some of these new functions, but it wouldn't have to remain geographically centered. Something like that could really grow and retain some of those positive governance attributes.
Could you tell us where the money savings would come from? Because I don't think we have like peak pricing.
So Dominion has to fundamentally shift what it's doing right now, which I'll talk about in a minute, to create this new model for virtual power plants. That's what the bill requires. So they do have time of use pricing in limited circumstance, but it's complicated. So they would really need to build out a system. And again, I'll talk about what they currently have now and how they might kind of shoehorn that into virtual power plant brand. But a lot of things would shift in order to give customers the incentives that they deserve for having these assets, investing in them, putting them in place.
So are you saying that status quo?
I'm trying to
That's
understand.
quo or with under
I
that.
think you should talk about cash flows. I think so. If you're a homeowner and you invest in a battery, and then it becomes part of the virtual power plant, they can get called on, you get compensated for that.
Or
What is your
even
net
would
present
it get
value?
called on?
Well, that's the
That's
utility.
what I-
rates.
Okay.
You
so
may
let
have
me-
missed the presentation from the
Yeah, I did, sorry. So,
DPP
Are
guy.
you familiar with the virtual power plant?
I'm just trying to understand like where the, I understand time of pricing arbitrage. I don't understand how that applies here in Virginia.
Dominion would be. I already have time of use rates. I mean, they've been,
Really?
they.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me talk about what programs they currently have. And then what you basically need to know about a virtual power plant is it differs from net metering in that if you have solar on your rooftop, you can sell it back to Dominion on a net basis, but they're never paying you for your excess. They're
Yeah.
crediting you later.
And it can never go above.
Yeah.
what
Right.
your-
So
It's an offset, but it's never.
that's from a paradigm in which they really don't want to lose the customer and it's offsetting energy, but a solar electron that the utility has to buy at 5 p.m. isn't very valuable. In some cases, it might have a negative value. And so the utility typically wants to resist having to not charge a customer or pay a customer for that electron. Exactly. So adding a battery not only provides resilience, but it changes the overall arbitrage, not of just your home, but if it can call on all of those resources, if there are really many, many batteries at many, many homes, then it can call on them all at once to not just shave a peak, but prevent an outage, arbitrage over the entire system.
Much more efficient
Presuming
at
that you're
scale.
not
Right.
using everything you're generating
opt in.
at the moment.
You opt in and they ask you, but that can be.
And so,
reduced here.
okay, so your
Right.
fridge turns off.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's
sure.
what I'm trying to
No, no, no,
understand.
no.
Like,
I know we don't have much
okay, that's
time.
fine. Keep
I
going.
would love for you
That's
to
fine.
watch the presentation that we had. I think it was in
But last month,
the SMUD
Okay.
presentation was a
oh, the
couple months
SMUD,
ago.
yeah.
Really kind of laid out like what are these, how do they work? There's a lot of information online too. But Dominion has a number of like discrete programs that could be packaged together to look like a virtual power plant. None of them include a battery though. They don't have any kind of, unless you guys tell me, I couldn't find any evidence of a battery rewards program. So I'm hoping that we can, I just made like a quick summary of what I could find online about their existing programs. So I'm hoping that we can use this to generate some specific questions for the speaker next month. But there are sort of two categories. One is the sort of demand response category where, the customer is compensated for reducing their energy use. One is a smart thermostat rewards, EV charging rewards, peak time rebates, water energy rewards, and time of use rates. For smart thermostat, you can buy one from Dominion or there are others that you can have. I think Dominion gives rebates that might be based on the federal incentive, so those could be going away. If you're enrolled in smart thermostat rewards, they're going to reduce your heating or cooling depending on the season. You receive $25 after the first summer and $10 per year after that for participating in at least 75% of event hours per summer. Is that a meaningful incentive? Like, how do they arrive at those? There's some questions that I have. For EV charging rewards, you need a level 2 charger. You get a one-time enrollment benefit of $125 if you enroll within 120 days. You get an annual benefit of $40 via a prepaid MasterCard if you allow Dominion to adjust your charging behavior. So we're still talking about demand response, not Dominion calling on that battery within whatever parameters the customer would set. You can have up to 2 chargers. You get notified of that event, and you can opt out of events through an app. There's an alternative program that I didn't quite understand called an EV telematics program that I think is newer. It's just for Tesla owners. But again, the EV charging is if your vehicle is plugged in and you're willing to let them sort of throttle your charge overnight. Very different from having a bidirectional V2G type program that would allow the utility to discharge that battery. There is peak time rebates where you get a $1.25 per kilowatt hour credit for conservation during peak time rebate events. This is based on your historical usage during a given time. They'll ping you, you reduce your use. If it's lower than your average, you get that $1.25 per kilowatt hour. And you can't concurrently be enrolled in the smart thermostat, EV charger, or time of use rates. There's water energy rewards. There's a $400 rebate off a heat pump. Also might be based on a federal incentive, not sure. You allow the utility to turn off the heater during a peak event. You can opt out if you want, but if you participate in 75% of the event hours, which are 3 to 4 hours, maximum of 45 times per year, if you participate in 75% per season, you get $40 the first year and $10 every year thereafter. You have to live in a single family home. For time of use rates, John, you might have additional information about this. You have to have a smart meter. There are 2 distinct seasons with 3 pricing tiers: on peak, off peak, and super off peak. Time of use rates, I won't go into it. I'm going to assume that you guys are familiar with the concept, but utilities spend a lot of time smoothing out the highly fluctuating cost of power to give you a per kilowatt hour rate. It can be very punitive to use a lot of electricity during a peak time if you're on time of use rates, which is why a lot of utilities, some of them have rolled this out and then quickly rolled it back because people do not like being charged for normal energy use during peak times. But if you are willing to put in a little bit of effort and understand what conservation looks like, and you're familiar with those peak times, and you've kind of memorized what season you're in and what tier you're in and the times, it can be very beneficial. But you can't be enrolled in smart thermostat rewards or EV charging rewards or smart cooling rewards, which I couldn't find any information about on their site. Do you want to add anything about time of use rates? Okay, I'll just roll through. So there are 3, maybe more, but
Is there some, there's so much detail here, but is there a, what is that we can do as an energy committee to help?
So they're going to take these programs and figure out how to make them a virtual power plant. So they are allowed to take these programs and do that. So there is a sort of minimal effort way to do that, and to kind of package it and brand it as such. But I think, based on this legislation, like the General Assembly is looking for something more robust to get up to 450 megawatts. That would be one of the largest virtual power plants in the country. So they're either going to need to figure out how to make these a lot more generous or to have a lot more people participate, maybe both. And so I thought it would be helpful to kind of know what is the baseline, like why is this not a virtual power plant already? And I think just adding batteries is not enough, but it's a really key piece of the puzzle. So I wanted to kind of lay the groundwork before we have our speaker next month. What is the status quo without this legislation? What do they already have that kind of starts to look like components?
Sure. JB has a question.
Yes.
JB? You have a question?
Yeah, well, not so much a question as a comment. I think some of the clean tech industry has the opinion that while virtual power plants are a fantastic opportunity for many reasons, the decision that was approved by the governor to only give one utility a multi-year pilot program is actually delaying progress and is a detriment to getting what do you need a pilot for when other states and other cities and other countries and other utilities around the country and the world have no problems operating VPPs. It's not like you need to, it's not something that's going to be unique to Dominion territory that doesn't already exist everywhere else. It's really just propose something within the framework of the regulatory structure of Virginia and then go forward. The fact that it's going to be until 2028 before there's perhaps a full program available is really a delay tactic, and it benefits incumbent interests, which are primarily fossil fuel producers, generators, power plant investors, and the utility, because if they can slow the roll of grid technologies that reduce the need for more power generation, then they can ensure that they can continue to invest and get a guaranteed rate of return from their investment, because that's the only way they profit is if they can spend more money, they get a guaranteed rate of return off the investment. So I think that's an important consideration, and it could be of value if there's any way that we as the Energy Committee can accelerate their efforts or bring to them solutions without them saying, oh, we have to look through all the options. Well, here are already options that are fit for purpose for your territory. I think that might be a way to go, sort of like to nudge them in that direction, but I don't know the politics about that. I just wanted to share sort of that high level view. And then also part of the VPP legislation requires that after they propose something to the commission, that by next November, a year and a half, almost a year and a half from now, they propose new tariffs for residential, commercial, and industrial VPPs. So that would get into, well, they get to choose to what extent they're going to take a hit or not from these VPPs that they are guiding with their best interests in mind. So I want to throw that out there as well. But that doesn't keep us from proposing tariffs that are already successful elsewhere. One thing of interest is that Dominion also just put forward, it's related, but they also just put forward their rate adjustment proposal. And I see some laughter there. So in their rate adjustment plan that they sent to the commission, they are asking for what their words are more sophisticated. Use the more sophisticated time of use rates because we now have more sophisticated meter technology, right? So the more sophisticated time of use rates for solar would give solar a disadvantage because they're not putting electricity on the grid during peak hours. But by that same token, a more sophisticated use of energy would extremely value a solar plus storage system, giving it much more value than the current flat rates or non-smart metered rates. So that's something to keep in the back of your mind when they come out with, additional rate plans. If you want to be more sophisticated, then you should just continue to stay more sophisticated with their VPP proposals. And then also on the
Jamie,
more Yeah.
I'm gonna pause you there because I do want to get through the rest of the
all right,
divs.
I'll save the rest for later.
We're just coming up on the end of our time.
Okay, thanks.
And I want to get through this so we're all on level set for next month, but I'll send it around. I wanted to go over 3 of the existing generation opportunities for residential customers. So one of them is residential solar solutions, which is Dominion will help customers get solar on their rooftop. That might include reduced installation costs. It might be net metering. It might also be parallel generation. So your home is taking electrons from the grid, but you're also generating and just exclusively sending that back. I'm not sure what circumstances would make that attractive. It might be something like APS, which is primarily drawing from the grid, but wants to invest in solar as well. Community solar, where you match up to 100% of your electricity use with energy and RECs. They're currently fully subscribed on their community solar program, so it's not really an option, but it does involve the customer paying extra per month, so typically $20 extra per month, or you can do blocks of 100 kilowatt hours each for $2 each, and that's not something that's available to larger customers, just for smaller entities. But the big program is the net metering program, which is a 1-to-1 credit, up to 25 kilowatt hours, up to 3 megawatts commercial, and up to 150% of the customer's annual expected consumption. And those were actually increased by the VCEA from a less generous starting point. So in the net metering program, your meter is going to record your energy delivered and your energy received. If you exceed the energy that you're sending to the grid in one billing period, it gets carried over to the next. So as I mentioned before, you're never actually receiving a payment from Dominion. I'm not sure when, but at some point the State Corporation Commission directed both Dominion and Appalachian Power to revise their programs to avoid cost shifting to non-participating customers. And the intent behind this is, when you have sort of a critical mass of net metering customers such that the utility is not collecting sufficient revenues to, cover their costs of providing service, but you're still, you as the customer are still, potentially generating costs from the maintenance of electric wires in the transmission system. Those costs could then get socialized to other customers who can't afford the solar panels. So to combat that, the SCC asked the utilities to revise their programs. It does look to me like they're going to become potentially less generous. So the proposal that Dominion submitted would do 3 things. One, it would shift from annual netting to real-time netting, which is enabled by advanced meters that were not ubiquitous when the program was created. It would allow an export credit rate to compensate customers for their excess generation, and that would reflect Dominion's avoided cost plus the REC value. So it's different from that 1-to-1 retail rate. And it would also institute an application fee and $1 per month administrative charge for those customers. However, if you're already enrolled in the program, you can stay on the legacy net metering program, or if you're a new low-income customer, you can elect the old or the new net metering program. To me, this does not set Dominion up for a transition to virtual power plant type pricing and regime. But it may be that this all occurred before this legislation passed. It's still very early days from this becoming law. So I'm very eager to hear from the Dominion representative next month about how they're looking at this, whether this is something they supported or resisted primarily. I have not heard the view before that this would slow anything down. To me, it seems like something that Dominion was not anticipating or headed towards. Although certainly a third party, as I mentioned, could come along and set something like this up and at least bid into the PJM market. So I think Dominion should have an interest in doing something like this themselves or working with an entity so that they retain control over the assets. But as I mentioned, I'm talking with some folks in the clean energy trade group world, and I think this is very interesting. I think there's a real opportunity here, and particularly for Arlington. And I think it's something that we can and should get involved in and try and both accelerate and make as valuable as possible for consumers. So that's my pitch. I know we're a little bit over time. I have been asked to present some of this to C2E2 at its meeting a week from Monday. So if you are around and available and interested, I encourage you to tune in and learn a little bit more and offer some thoughts. And Jamie, I'm happy to follow up with you after the meeting to work through some of your comments as well, and anybody else who has anything to share about this topic. Apologies, we ran out of time. But again, we'll be revisiting this next month as well.
I had a follow-up on Jamie, it'll be real fast. I just want to offer some caution here because I think the best way that we could accelerate Dominion doing this is for us to compete with them. And so can we talk about microgrids, like parallel with whatever we want to engage, but like, can we push the county to do that? Can we push ABS to do that? That's a good way to compete with them, and to flood our own community with our own. I know it's not the same, it's smaller scale, but why aren't we taking up that opportunity?
Initial reaction is if we could, we would have.
Do you think that there's just limitations?
Yeah, I think the intent is there, but I don't think the county has the budget, the wherewithal, the technical know-how to compete. I think a third party could, but that's not something that we can bring about necessarily. And for the reasons I stated before, I don't think that's necessarily in the very best interest of Arlington consumers. But point taken, this isn't the fastest way. I think it's the fastest way in the reality that we currently occupy.
Yeah, I'd say thank you for just doing all the work on this, and I think it's a real opportunity. I'm excited just to see us take a jump at something. There's lots and lots of questions here, but I think it's just really exciting opportunity.
Yeah, this is not the only conversation we'll have about this. So here for next month, I'll send this around as well as the bill text for folks to review, and definitely encourage folks to do their own research as well. And next month, I hope that we can reward Dominion for speaking with us with constructive questions. I know this is, yeah, I would love a civil discussion. No sniping.
Can I just want to share something for everybody's awareness relevant to the VPPs. Just yesterday, Virginia Energy closed its RFP for its Solar for All program, which is part of the EPA $7 billion greenhouse gas reduction fund. And it's got two parts. One is single family residences and one is multifamily residences that is solar plus storage. So when you're talking about a VPP pilot, the timing matches up very well for Virginia Solar for All program and trying to, maybe we can, sort of put that in front of the plate of the speaker next time and just say, how are they considering working with this pilot program for low-income homes that are doing solar plus storage with grants through Virginia Energy all across the state?
There is a little note in here about increased incentives for customers in historically disadvantaged communities. So I think that the equity component of this is one of its most attractive features, and Solar for All definitely plays a role in making that more accessible and more of a reality. So absolutely. Okay.
Thank you.
I think we're out of time to give, to get an update on regional activities. Unless, Rich, you think that could be done in 2 minutes or less?
Sure. Regional, I sent along in the email for this meeting, the link to Built Environment Energy Advisory Committee, which is advisory committee to a larger group within Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. They have a meeting from 10 to noon this coming Thursday. So I just checked, the agenda is up and all the materials are up there. So take a look at it. Seems like an interesting meeting for a number of people at this meeting. Quick update, climate action plan. We're working together with our potential vendor in iterative process, getting the scope of work and costing to where we need it to be. We also briefed the county manager's office. And then we've been given the green light. We'll be briefing county board members on the topic as well in the coming weeks. And then last but not least, we have a communications specialist person, comms 2 specialist person, gone through one round of reviewing applicants and winnowed it down to about a handful of people that we'll be bringing in for in-person interviews. We are flush with great candidates. That's the great story. So that's it.
Thank you very much, Rich. And with that, I'm going to adjourn before anyone else has a question. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you all.
That's exciting stuff.
You guys had an idea here last week?
Yeah, last.
Missed it.
So maybe I'll bug Rich for the